A janitor? You're just a janitor? My father's voice carried that familiar tone of disappointment that had been the soundtrack of my adult life. The family dinner I'd been dreading for weeks had finally arrived, and it was going exactly as expected. My mother sat beside him, her lips pressed into a tight line of disapproval. Across the table, my older brother Marcus smirked behind his wine glass, his Harvard Business School degree practically gleaming on his forehead. It's not just janitorial work, I explained for what felt like the 100th time. I'm part of the operations team at Meridian Technologies. Sweeping floors is sweeping floors, no matter what fancy title they give you, my father retorted, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. He was a cardiologist with his own practice, and anything less than a professional degree was beneath consideration in the Thompson household. My mother leaned forward, her diamond earrings catching the light. Honey, we just worry. You had such potential. Your SAT scores were even higher than Marcus's. My brother's smile faltered slightly at this unwelcome reminder. You could have been anything. A doctor, lawyer, engineer. And instead, she gestured vaguely at me, as if my entire existence was an uncomfortable appendage she couldn't quite place. I sat there, 32 years old, being treated like a disappointing teenager, the weight of their judgment pressed down on my shoulders, heavier than all the equipment I'd moved at work that week. I didn't bother explaining about Mr. Griffith's mentorship or the special projects I was handling. They'd decided on my narrative years ago, and no amount of evidence would change it now. Well, my father said with finality, at least you're employed. That's something, I suppose. I nodded and focused on my plate, silently counting the minutes until I could leave. This was just temporary, I reminded myself. Just part of the plan. Started at Meridian Technologies 5 years ago, right after my master's degree in systems engineering. The job market had crashed, and while all my classmates were frantically searching for prestigious positions, I found myself drawn to a different path. Harold Griffith, the 68-year-old owner of Meridian, had given a guest lecture at my university that changed everything. While others saw an old man talking about outdated business models, I saw a visionary who understood something fundamental about technology and human connection. After class, I approached him with questions that turned into a 3-hour conversation. Most people want to start at the top, Harold had said, his eyes crinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses, but they don't understand what they're building on. I need someone who's willing to learn this business from the foundation up. His offer was unorthodox. Start at the bottom, literally on the maintenance crew, and learn every aspect of the company from the ground floor. The salary was modest, but the education would be priceless. I accepted immediately, despite my family's horror. You're throwing away your future, my father had declared when I declined an interview at his friend's engineering firm. My mother had cried. Marcus had laughed, but I trusted Harold's vision. For the first year, I did indeed clean floors, fix broken equipment, and handle maintenance requests. I learned the names of every employee, understood the building's infrastructure intimately, and observed the flow of information through the company. By year 2, Harold had me rotating through departments, 2 months in accounting, 3 in product development, a stint in marketing. I took notes on everything, identified inefficiencies, and began to see the company as a living organism rather than compartmentalized units. My colleagues were confused at first. The janitor suddenly sitting in on their meetings. But Harold's endorsement carried weight. Pay attention to Adam, he'd tell department heads. He sees things differently. At home, I lived modestly in a small apartment, saving most of my earnings and quietly investing them according to Harold's guidance. My family assumed I was struggling financially, and I never corrected them. The distance between us grew, with holiday gatherings becoming increasingly strained as Marcus's career in investment banking flourished, while I remained the janitor. What my family didn't know was that by year 3, I was Harold's unofficial right hand. We met every morning at 6 a.m. to discuss strategy, and every evening to review the day's observations. He taught me everything: how to read a room, negotiate contracts, identify promising innovations, and most importantly, how to value people for their contributions rather than their titles. The problem with most businesses, Harold would say, is that the left hand doesn't know what the right is doing. But you, Adam, you've touched every part of this company. You understand it holistically in a way no MBA ever could. By year 4, I was developing a comprehensive restructuring plan for Meridian, one that would position us at the forefront of emerging technologies while protecting the jobs of loyal employees. Harold reviewed each iteration, challenging my assumptions and refining my strategy. "Almost there," he'd say, his approval more valuable to me than any recognition from my family. "But remember, this isn't just about profit. It's about building something that matters." Around the beginning of my 5th year at Meridian, I started noticing subtle changes in how the company operated. Board meetings were being scheduled without Harold's knowledge. New consultants appeared, walking through departments with clipboards and frowns, employees tensing as they passed. "Cost-cutting measures," the official emails explained. "Standard procedure." But I knew better. During my time in accounting, I'd learned to read the rhythms of corporate finances. These weren't standard procedures. They were preparations for a sale. I started keeping a journal, documenting conversations and decisions that seemed suspicious. Using my maintenance access, I occasionally worked late, observing after-hours, meetings I wasn't supposed to know about. The executive team, minus Harold, was entertaining acquisition offers from Vertex Industries, a notorious corporate raider known for purchasing companies, stripping their assets, and discarding the remains. One evening, as I was replacing air filters near the conference room, I overheard the CFO, James Whitmore. "Griffith is getting old. His sentimentality is a liability. The shareholders deserve maximum return, not his outdated loyalty projects." I froze, filter in hand, as Martha Chen, the head of legal, responded. "Harold's stepping back for health. Reasons next month. We can push the acquisition through then. The paperwork's almost ready." My stomach dropped. Harold hadn't mentioned any health concerns or plans to step back. Something wasn't right. The next morning, I arrived at 5:30 a.m., earlier than our usual meeting time. Harold looked tired when he arrived. The usual spark in his eyes dimmed. "Everything all right?" I asked carefully. He sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "Just some minor health issues, Adam. Nothing to worry about." "Serious? Enough for you to step back from operations?" I kept my tone casual. Harold's head snapped up, eyes sharp again. "Who told you that?" I explained what I'd overheard, watching as his expression shifted from surprise to understanding, then to a calm determination I recognized from our strategy sessions. "So that's their play," he said quietly. "I should have seen it coming." Over. The next few weeks, Harold and I developed our counter-strategy. While maintaining my routine, cleaning, maintenance, rotation through departments, I gathered information. Using my access to company systems, I documented the executive team's communications with Vertex, their plans to restructure, and most damning, their manipulation of financial projections to convince shareholders that selling was the only viable option. Harold, meanwhile, reached out to loyal board members and long-term investors, quietly building a coalition. He also underwent comprehensive medical testing, securing documentation that his health concerns had been greatly exaggerated, possibly through manipulated test results from a clinic owned by a Vertex subsidiary. We worked in absolute secrecy. To the executive team, I remained invisible, just the janitor who emptied their trash cans and fixed their broken chair hydraulics. To the rest of the company, I was still the odd protégé on some inexplicable career path. Only Harold knew what I was really doing. One night, as we worked late reviewing documents, Harold asked, "Why do you stay, Adam? With your skills, you could be making triple your salary elsewhere. Your family certainly wants that for you." I considered the question carefully. "Because here, I'm building something meaningful. I'm learning what really matters in business, and it's not titles or corner offices." Harold nodded, satisfied. "That's why you're the right person for this. You see value, where others see only status." By month's end, we had everything we needed. Documentation of the executive team's breach of fiduciary duty, evidence of their collusion with Vertex, proof of Harold's excellent health, and most importantly, our alternative vision for Meridian's future. The annual shareholder meeting was approaching, the meeting where the executive team planned to announce Harold's retirement and fast-track the Vertex acquisition. They had no idea what was coming. I continued playing my part, head down, seemingly oblivious. At another painful family dinner, I listened to more variations of, "When will you get a real job?" without revealing that I was about to help save a $200 million company from corporate raiders. Patience, I told myself, as my father lectured me about wasted potential. Everything happens when it's supposed to. The day of the shareholder meeting arrived with perfect dramatic timing. The executive boardroom gleamed with polished mahogany and expectation. James Whitmore stood at the head of the table, presentation remote in hand, while other executives settled into leather chairs with the comfortable confidence of people who believed they'd already won. I entered pushing a maintenance cart, nodding respectfully as I checked the room's environmental controls. No one paid me any attention. The janitor was furniture, present but unseen. "Where's Harold?" Martha Chen asked, checking her watch. "He's confirmed his attendance, right?" "His assistant said he's running a few minutes late," Whitmore replied. "Not a problem. It gives us time to align on the message." The message being Harold's supposed declining health and the urgent need to accept Vertex's generous offer. I kept my expression neutral as I adjusted the thermostat, though my heart pounded against my ribs. At precisely 10 a.m., the doors opened, and Harold walked in. Despite being nearly 70, he stood straight and strong, dressed impeccably in his signature blue suit. The executive team's expressions flickered with surprise. Harold looked anything but frail. "Good morning, everyone," he said pleasantly, taking his usual seat at the head of the table. "Before we begin, I'd like to address some concerns about my health." Whitmore cleared his throat. "Harold, we've arranged the agenda carefully. Perhaps we should—" "My health comes first on today's agenda, James," Harold interrupted smoothly, his voice gentle but allowing no argument. "I've brought my complete medical records, certified by 3 independent specialists." He placed a folder on the table. "As you can see, I'm in excellent condition for a man of my age. Certainly not stepping down anytime soon." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Martha Chen's perfectly manicured nails tapped nervously against her tablet. "That's wonderful news," Whitmore managed, his smile strained. "Nevertheless, the Vertex offer represents significant shareholder value, and—" "Does it?" Harold asked. "Adam, would you join us, please?" Every head turned as I stepped away from the maintenance cart. Without a word, I removed my service jacket, revealing the tailored shirt and tie underneath. The confusion on the executives' faces would have been comical in another context. "What is this?" Whitmore demanded. "This is a closed meeting." "Adam Thompson is here at my request," Harold stated calmly. "As of this morning, he's officially been appointed Chief Strategy Officer of Meridian Technologies." The silence that followed was absolute. I took my place beside Harold, setting down a leather portfolio containing every document we'd gathered over the past months. Harold continued. "Adam has prepared an alternative analysis of Meridian's position and the Vertex offer. I believe the board should review it before making any decisions." I opened the portfolio and began distributing copies of our report. "You'll find that Vertex's offer significantly undervalues Meridian's innovative potential," I explained, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Page 12 details how their planned asset liquidation would eliminate 340 jobs while generating only short-term returns." "This is irregular," Martha Chen protested. "Mr. Thompson isn't qualified to—" "Mr. Thompson holds a master's in systems engineering and has worked in every department of this company," Harold interrupted. "He understands Meridian comprehensively. But more importantly," Harold slid another document across the table, "he has documented evidence of coordination between certain executive team members and Vertex representatives, dating back 18 months. Coordination that was never disclosed to the board." The color drained from Whitmore's face as I activated the presentation screen, displaying emails, meeting notes, and financial projections that had been intentionally manipulated. "You've been spying on us?" Whitmore sputtered, outrage masking his panic. "No," I replied calmly. "I've been doing my job, ensuring the operational integrity of Meridian. These communications were discovered during routine system maintenance and security protocols." A board member leaned forward, frowning at the displayed evidence. "Is this accurate? You've been negotiating with Vertex for 18 months? "It's more complicated than it appears," Whitmore began, but his usual smooth confidence had vanished. For the next hour, we methodically presented our findings. The unauthorized negotiations, the manipulated health reports, the deliberately pessimistic financial projections, and finally, our alternative vision. A 5-year growth strategy that would increase Meridian's value threefold without sacrificing its workforce or innovative culture. By meeting's end, the atmosphere had transformed completely. The board voted unanimously to reject Vertex's offer and implement our growth strategy instead. Furthermore, they called for an immediate investigation into the executive team's actions. As the meeting adjourned, Harold placed a hand on my shoulder. "I believe it's time we made another announcement," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Adam isn't just our new CSO. As of next year, he'll be my successor and partner in Meridian Technologies." Whitmore, gathering his papers with shaking hands, looked up in disbelief. "You're what?" "My partner," Harold repeated clearly. "I've spent 5 years preparing him for this role. While you were planning to sell our company's future, Adam was learning how to build it." The week following the shareholder meeting unfolded with the precision of a perfectly executed chess game. Harold called an all-company meeting in the main auditorium, the first time in Meridian's history that every employee, from executives to maintenance staff, gathered in one place. I stood beside him on stage, still adjusting to being visible after years of strategic invisibility. Harold spoke first, outlining what had nearly happened to the company and how it had been prevented. Then, without fanfare, he introduced me as Meridian's new Chief Strategy Officer and his future successor. "Some of you know Adam as the guy who fixed your heating vent or rotated through your department," Harold said, his voice carrying easily through the auditorium. "What you didn't know is that he was learning every aspect of this company, preparing for this day." The expressions in the audience ranged from confusion to shock to dawning comprehension. In the front row, James Whitmore and the executive team sat stone-faced, their careers effectively over. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped forward with the quiet confidence I'd learned from Harold. "I believe a company is only as strong as its foundation," I began. "For 5 years, I've had the privilege of learning Meridian from the ground up, literally. I've cleaned your offices, fixed your equipment, processed your invoices, and listened to your ideas. That's why I can stand here today and promise you, Meridian's future includes all of you." I outlined our growth strategy, emphasizing that unlike Vertex's plan, ours would preserve jobs while creating new opportunities. With each point, I could see hope replacing fear in the employees' expressions. "The executive team members who conspired to sell this company have been suspended pending investigation," I continued, my gaze steady as I looked at Whitmore. "Their offices are being secured as we speak, and their system access has been revoked until security personnel appeared at the auditorium entrances. They would escort the suspended executives to clear out personal belongings under supervision. A humiliation Whitmore and his allies had inflicted on countless employees during previous restructurings. "This isn't personal," I added, echoing the very phrase Whitmore had used when laying off an entire department last year. "It's just business." The meeting concluded with a standing ovation. Not for me, but for Harold and the company's secure future. As employees filed out, many stopped to shake my hand or share their relief. A few admitted they'd always wondered why I was so interested in their department's operations. One longtime administrative assistant laughed, "I thought you were just really dedicated to fixing the copy machine." That evening, Harold and I received an unexpected visitor in his office, Margaret Winters, Meridian's largest individual shareholder and a notoriously shrewd investor. She'd flown in specifically to meet the janitor who outsmarted the suits. "Quite the performance today," she remarked, studying me with intelligent eyes. "Though I suspect the real performance was the 5 years preceding it." "It wasn't a performance," I corrected gently. "It was preparation." She nodded approvingly. Harold always did have an unconventional approach to succession planning. I must admit, when he first mentioned his protégé years ago, I pictured someone quite different. "Most people did," Harold chuckled. "That was rather the point. As we discussed Meridian's future, my phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from my family. News travels fast in business circles, and apparently my father's colleague had witnessed the day's events. I silenced the phone without checking the messages. They could wait. The next morning, Vertex's CEO called, demanding to speak with Harold. I took the call instead. "Mr. Griffith is in a meeting," I informed him. "I'm Adam Thompson, Chief Strategy Officer. How can I help you?" There was a pause. "You're the janitor," he said flatly. "I'm the partner who just prevented you from dismantling a company with 40 years of innovation and 300 families depending on it," I corrected. "Now, did you have a business matter to discuss?" After a moment of stunned silence, he ended the call. Within an hour, Vertex publicly withdrew all interest in Meridian. By afternoon, our stock had risen 15%. The internal investigation moved swiftly. Evidence of the executive's duplicity was overwhelming, and termination proceedings began immediately. As a final touch, I personally delivered their termination paperwork, in the same maintenance card I'd used for years. "You won't get away with this," Whitmore hissed as I placed his severance agreement on the desk of what was formerly his office. "I have connections." "So do I replied calmly. "I have connections with every person in this building, from the night shift security guard to the board chairperson. People you never bothered to acknowledge, much less respect." His face flushed with anger, but there was nothing he could do. The evidence was irrefutable, the board's decision unanimous. As I turned to leave, he called after me. "Why the charade? Why spend years pushing a broom when you could have just taken a normal executive path?" I paused at the door. "Because I wanted to build something that would last, not just add a line to my resume. Harold taught me that understanding the foundation is essential to leading the whole. It wasn't a charade, Mr. Whitmore. It was an education you never bothered to get." 1 month after the shareholder meeting, life at Meridian had found a new equilibrium. The executive team had been replaced with a mixture of internal promotions and carefully selected external talent. Our 5-year strategy was underway, with early indicators exceeding projections. Harold had moved into a chairman role, still present but gradually stepping back as I took on more day-to-day leadership. We continued our 6 a.m. meetings, though now they took place in my office rather than the maintenance room where we'd strategized for years. "You've done well," Harold told me one morning, pride evident in his voice. "Better than I could have hoped." "Had a good teacher," I replied simply. He shook his head. "I just provided opportunity. You provided the character and vision." The press had picked up our story, dubbing me the undercover boss, and Harold the chess master. We'd declined most interview requests, preferring to let our work speak for itself, but the narrative had captured public imagination. Meridian's reputation as an innovative, employee-centered company had never been stronger. I'd moved into a new apartment, nothing ostentatious, but comfortable and closer to the office. My salary had increased significantly, though much of it went into investments or the employee education fund I'd established. Material wealth had never been my motivation, and that hadn't changed. The most difficult adjustment, surprisingly, had been with my family. After days of avoiding their calls, I finally agreed to another dinner at my parents' home. This time, I arrived in a tailored suit, having come directly from a board meeting. The atmosphere was markedly different. My father, usually domineering, seemed almost hesitant. My mother fluttered around with uncharacteristic nervousness. Marcus, his usual smirk replaced by a thoughtful frown, studied me as if seeing a stranger. "So," my father began after an awkward silence, "Chief Strategy Officer, partner in the company. Quite a leap from maintenance work." "It wasn't a leap," I explained, maintaining my composure. "It was a deliberate journey. Every position I held taught me something essential about how Meridian works and what it needs to thrive." "But why didn't you tell us?" my mother asked, hurt evident in her voice. "All these years we thought you thought what you wanted to think," I said gently. "I tried explaining many times that there was more to my position than you assumed. You weren't interested in hearing it." Marcus cleared his throat. "My firm's considering an investment in Meridian, now that the Vertex situation is resolved. Your strategy document is impressive." Coming from Marcus, this was tantamount to effusive praise. I nodded my acknowledgement. "I should have listened better," my father admitted suddenly, surprising all of us. "When you talked about your work, I heard only the parts that confirmed what I already believed. I missed the bigger picture." It wasn't quite an apology, but from a man who had never admitted error in his life, it represented significant growth. "We're proud of you," my mother added, reaching across to squeeze my hand. We always have been, but now you understand what I was building, I finished for her. The hurt of years of dismissal wouldn't disappear overnight. But this was a start. The conversation shifted to genuine questions about my work and vision for Meridian. For the first time, my family listened, really listened, as I explained the philosophy Harold had instilled in me. That leadership means understanding every level of operation, that value isn't measured by title or salary, but by impact and integrity. After dinner, as I was leaving, my father walked me to my car. "I was wrong about you," he said quietly. "You saw something I missed, that the path to success isn't always straight up." I nodded, accepting this rare moment of vulnerability from him. Different journeys lead to different perspectives. Mine taught me to see systems holistically, rather than hierarchically. He considered this, then asked, "Do you think Meridian might have internship opportunities?" "I have a young patient. Brilliant kid, unconventional thinker. Med school isn't the right fit, but he needs direction." I smiled, recognizing this as my father's way of showing genuine respect for my path. "Send me his information. We're always looking for people who see things differently." 3 months later, Meridian held its quarterly all-company meeting. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of employees whose names and stories I knew from my years moving among them, I felt a profound sense of purpose. "A company isn't a building or a balance sheet," I told them. "It's people connected by shared purpose. I learned that from fixing your desk lamps and listening to your frustrations. I learned it from watching how ideas flow when barriers are removed. Most importantly, I learned it from Harold Griffith, who saw potential where others saw only position." Harold, seated in the front row, nodded in acknowledgement. "Some have asked why I wasted years doing maintenance work when I could have started at the top," I continued. "The answer is simple. I wasn't pushing a broom. I was building a foundation of knowledge, relationships, and trust that will support us all as we grow." The applause that followed wasn't for the undercover boss narrative that still fascinated the press. It was for the authentic connection we'd built, a company culture based on mutual respect and genuine understanding. Later that day, a junior maintenance technician stopped by my office with a question about the environmental control system in the new wing. I set aside my executive paperwork, rolled up my sleeves, and followed him to examine the issue personally. Some habits, it turns out, are worth keeping. Like the story? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to see more stories of strategic revenge and justice served with a side of wisdom.